Aloha, everybody. This is Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate Radio on the KAOI radio group. We're broadcasting on 11:10 a.m. As well as 96.7 FM, 98.7 FM, and our friends on the west side at 95.5 FM. I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, the Hansen Ohana. I've had my license for 20 years. I've been broker in charge of our office for 6. And I work with my family. Been doing it a long time. And today I wanted to have a little meeting. This is a Zoom meeting, so you might hear a little bit of fuzz over the radio show. But I have 2 guests with me, Jason Economou from the Government Affairs Director for the Real Estate Association of Maui. Aloha, Jason. How you doing?
Doing well, Clint. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for coming. And also Jen Russo of Maui Vacation Rental Association. She's the executive director there. And you can go there with mvra.net. Hey, Jen, say hello and tell us a little bit about what you do at your organization.
Thanks, Clint, for having me. Like you said, my name is Jen Russo. I'm executive director of Maui Vacation Rental Association. What we are is a membership-based nonprofit organization working on the advocacy and affairs of vacation rentals in Maui County. Our members are condo owners, bed and breakfast operators, short-term rental owners, realtors, brokers, and managers, and affiliated businesses.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, over at Real Estate Association of Maui, you're the Government Affairs Director. Pretty much spells it out. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, not really. The Realtors Association of Maui is really proud of the work that we do in advocacy. We are the first line of defense for property rights, or at least that's how we like to think of ourselves here on Maui. And we frequently get to work with Jen Russo and the folks over at the MVRA. And it's a great working relationship that we have. And we've been doing a lot of good stuff for Maui County. I'm proud of our work.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you guys do. I know oftentimes it's a bit of a thankless job, but I just want you to know that I really appreciate all the hidden efforts that you guys are putting in there to help us out. You might not be the most visible of characters, but you're important to keeping the lifeblood of Maui going. In case you guys don't know, a large percentage of our tax revenue comes from vacation rentals, making up, I believe, almost 30% for short-term rentals. It's about like 115 or so million. And those tax revenues are, of course, really important. Some of it comes from, increased property taxes. Other are from disbursements. So that being considered, I wanted to talk a little bit about how licensing and rules associated with vacation rentals work here on Maui. So of course, county by county, it can be a little bit different, but here we have 2 things: a variable tax rate. So depending on how you use your properties, how you're taxed. And the most expensive rate you can pay is, of course, the vacation rental rate, which is nearly 1%. And then in addition to that, of course, we have our TAT, transient accommodations tax, that gets paid directly by the renters that come in. And then GET, that's a separate tax altogether, but does, of course, come into a large part of the island's income, the majority still being vacation rentals. With everything that's going on with COVID right now, obviously we've had a really big drop in the levels of income, and the counties are struggling to deal with the shortfalls associated with this. Meanwhile, we've had many different bill proposals that are kind of coinciding with this. One of which was something that's relatively resolved at this point, and that was the Menatoya rule. Now, that's gone through many iterations. Menatoya, from its initial inception, before county had, specific zoning rules and districts, and both of you, please correct me if I'm wrong here, there was vacation rentals that were allowed, because they didn't specifically have hotel or whatnot. So apartment zoned areas with porticoches, greeting desks, just general apartment zone lands were begun and had vacation rental for this long-standing period. And I believe it was like, if you were doing vacation rentals in some fashion since those 1987 or so, you were grandfathered in. And as time went on, it kind of became a little bit more of a loophole. Of course, if you do have this, it's very important that you reach out to the county and have a letter stating that, yes, you have a history and are allowed to do it. Jason, you want to tell us a little bit about this and the changes that it's gone through?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That was an incredible attempt at summarizing a very, very complex
Massive.
and long issue, man. Uh, you pretty much got the history right. So back before 1989, it was a little bit Wild West when it comes to the apartment zoning districts. Maui has been a popular vacation destination for a long time, and particularly in the 80s, there was a lot of money coming into Maui to develop vacation rentable apartment units. So in 1989, after a couple of decades of this sort of development, the Maui County Council got together and they said, well, we really don't want short-term rentals or transient vacation rentals in the apartment zoning district. So they tried to get rid of it. Now, this didn't work out very well because when they did that, they had grandfathered in a bunch of other properties, and the attempts at trying to get rid of transient vacation rentals in the apartment zoning district sort of ended for the most part during the 90s. By 91, there wasn't a lot of political will to try and do it because when they tried to do it in 89, it didn't work out perfectly when they drafted the law. But by 2001, there was another big push to get rid of transient vacation rentals in the apartment zoning district. And a lot of this really came down to the same reasons why people want to get rid of it now: housing. Maui has historically been behind on housing for quite some time, the inventory that we have available. So in 2001, then Mayor Kimo Apana asked Richard Minatoya, one of the deputy corporation counsel at the time, to investigate this and come up with an opinion that determined, can we get rid of transient vacation rentals in the apartment zoning district? Richard Minatoya came back with an opinion that is regularly called the Minatoya opinion at this point. And what he said was, if you have and I'm really just going to summarize this, don't use, this is not legal advice. Let me stop what I'm saying real quick and give that caveat. I am an attorney, but none of what I'm saying should be construed as legal advice. This is just some background and my opinions. Okay, so back to the story. Richard Minatoya's opinion, and if you got a building that was built or permitted before 1989, it has historical transient vacation rental use. And Jen, what's that third one? It's within the original envelope that was permitted for 1989.
Less than 50% of the square footage, right?
Yeah. So if you meet these certain criteria, then you are grandfathered in and you have a vested property right. Now that's super important to me. There's a difference between vested rights and unvested rights. Vested rights are the rights that you take advantage of. So since 1989 or prior to 1989, there have been a lot of properties, a lot of units located within condos, but also in single family homes in the apartment zoning district that have been operating transient vacation rentals on and off. That's any rental that's less than 6 months long. There have been pushes to, I guess, undo the Minatoya opinion, but these have largely been unsuccessful. Now you fast forward from 2001 to 2014, the Realtors Association of Maui was working diligently with the county council, and we realized, hey, we're going to keep on getting into fights over every single Minatoya property unless we get this codified. So back around 2014, the county council included in the for the apartment zoning district in the permitted uses located in Maui County Code. It says that it codifies the Minatoya opinion. So it has it stated in law that it's not an exception to the uses. It is 100% a permitted use to operate a transient vacation rental if your unit meets certain criteria. Now, earlier this year, a bill was drafted by the planning department and it was submitted to the Maui Planning Commission. It was actually submitted to all three planning commissions. And the intent was there were some zoning districts that were unintentionally impacted by the Minatoya opinion and the subsequent codification. So there were several buildings which equate to, a few thousand units that could technically convert to transient vacation rental use now in 2020, even if they never did transient vacation rental use in the past, because they technically fell within those three requirements, prior to 1989, the permits, all that jazz. And the planning department came to RAM, the Realtors Association of Maui. I think they also went to the MVRA. They might have gone to, correct me if I'm wrong, they might have gone to the Chamber of Commerce even. But they met with stakeholders and they told us about this bill. And we kind of said, okay, this is a good idea. We want to preserve the housing that's been housing. And, you're not stripping anybody of a vested property right. If those people never used it for TVR use, then they never vested the right. They had it, they didn't use it. You don't use your rights, you can lose them. Planning department said, cool, we're all on board. Everybody was working together happily. The planning commission reviewed the bill, and the planning commission said, okay, we're on board too. So you'd think everything's all set. Fast forward to April 2020, a transmission goes from the planning department to the county council to be assigned to a committee for deliberation. That transmission included a bill claiming to be this Minatoya loophole bill that everybody signed off on. The one problem is it was a bait and switch. That wasn't the bill. Instead of the bill that had gone to the planning commissions and that had been discussed with RAM and the MVRA and Chamber of Commerce, it was some other bill that was well-intended, but really would have served to strip a lot of people of their property rights, because it would have regulated TVR use on a unit-by-unit basis.
Mm-hmm.
And it really would have blindsided lots. I mean, I'm talking thousands, tens of thousands of property owners would have been blindsided.
Connected to that too.
Yeah. So we put up a big stink. And, we got our members involved. We told everybody that would listen, hey, this is not how legislation should work. This is not how democracy should work. This goes against everything that you all should be interested in. And, much to the planning department's credit, they came back immediately and acknowledged that, yeah, it was a mistake. They hadn't really been aware of the unintended consequences of the revisions that they made. And they worked with us. Director McLean, Jackie Takakura, the folks over at the planning department reached out to the stakeholders once again, and they solicited our input, and they promised us, hey, we're going to look at this bill. We're going to make sure that it's in line with what the planning commissions reviewed. And they were apologetic. And they came back with a bill that was pretty darn good. It was almost there. But we still asked for a couple more revisions just to preserve property rights for everybody who had the vested right. And the planning department, without hesitation, acknowledged that those were good changes. It was a good compromise to make. And that bill ended up going up for its first reading at the county council this past Friday. And there were no additional revisions, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it looks like it's going to go for second reading, and there are almost never revisions made on second reading in front of the county council. If there are, it's a real bad idea. So that's something to be happy about. That is a win for property rights, and it preserves long-term housing for thousands of people. So we can all be happy about that.
Sneaking through on the loophole and trying to get something that's vacation rental that wasn't initially intended to be. And that's, I think, one of the big important parts to kind of spell out in the Minatoya rules is that, it's really about grandfathering people in, not allowing new use for it. You don't want to have a bastardization of the zoning rules. Really, we're just preserving, the lack of foresight when the zoning was first there, from my understanding.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So one of the questions about that, though, there's a lot of different complexes, on an individual basis, some of which are named, other ones that are not, and covered under the Minatoya. Like what, for example, Pohailani, it's actually an initial development brought up under hotel zoning. There's a portion oceanfront that's hotel zoning, and then there's multifamily use behind it. Now, when the initial rules, of course, the just dropping this on you, but the initial rules and allowances for there were to be vacation rental, and there's even a few units in there that are timeshare. Of course, the original documents have vanished through the ethers of time, and the original developers, many of whom passed away, and some of who, which remember, or original sales team say, oh yeah, there was a box of old tattered documents. They've henceforth disappeared. For those particular ones, I mean, that wouldn't fall under Menitoya anyway. I mean, that is a particular piece of property that is multifamily, even though front desk, it had, vacation rental history associated with it. It even has timeshare, which is very unique among vacation rentals. I mean, that's something I'm assuming would have to be individually work together with that particular association to get a letter from the county saying, okay, look, we realize this specific exemption for a specific property, correct?
I believe so. I'm going to search my emails while we're talking because I think I might have even gotten something related to this.
Sorry to drop that on you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's the problem with law and development. I mean, my legal advice, here is some free legal advice. Go get a lawyer that specializes in that. If you are in that building, make sure that association is reaching out to its legal counsel and working with them. We at RAM, we kind of have to look at more of a big picture thing. Rarely do we have the opportunity or the capacity to step in for an individual project to try and help them preserve their property rights. Instead, we're trying to help preserve property rights for as many projects and as many people as possible. So with Pohailani, yeah, I would need to know more before I can comment on it.
So if anybody does have a question about that, probably the best thing that they can do is go take a look at the Menitoya list in order to see whether or not their complex is on it. And if it's not on it, that would be a good opportunity to take the time to talk to your association, and don't let sleeping dogs lie, because the longer this goes by during this initial phase and process, the bigger of an issue it's going to be as time goes on. So I would say go ahead, meet this head on, and try to get it resolved and get a letter from the county. With other properties, you can do a request for service. So with that, you can provide your evidence, maybe tax histories, history of ownership, something along those lines. Go to the county, give them that, and then they can basically say, oh yes, you meet the criteria and you are under that, even though you might not specifically be on that list. That letter is going to be really important if you want to maintain that grandfathered status. And that would only apply to people who fit the rules. That being said, is there anything that you wanted to add to that, Jen, associated with the Menitoya? And, I'm sure many, many people, when that initial hubbub started, reached out concerned to you.
Right. And unfortunately, the planning department, when you look at the Menitoya list that we have on their website, it's not all inclusive. It doesn't have every single building and all the properties, because some condos are hotel zoned, and so they don't need to be on that list because they can do short-term rental without being on that list just because of their zoning. And so I would love if there was just like one list that had all the buildings and clarified what their status was one way or the other, but I think eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, because there are properties that are built on hotel zone land that actually are not vacation rentable. A lot of people might not realize that, but I think it's KLE Ocean Villas. Those are resident units that are just across the street from CAM 1. They are on hotel zone land, and then originally when they did their subdivision approval or their condominium approval for that particular chunk of land, they opted to not have vacation rentals because they wanted a more resident feel. So even though it's on hotel zone land, and you would have to make an amendment to those rules, those association rules, and get approval from the county. The possibility of doing that is very difficult because you have to get 70% of the people to agree and vote on the changing of it, at least for the association portion of it. Then it has to go
Mhm.
to the county for the final approval. Even so, it's allowable land technically, but they still have to make a modification to the
Mhm.
ordinances of that complex.
Right.
It would of course behoove Kaylee Ocean Villas to do that on a ownership perspective because it would dramatically increase their value. On the negative side, it would mean less housing associated, for the island, and that can really help people get approvals in places if they're going to be building something that limits their use. They're going to more of a resident. It's going to be easier for them to get those permits in place. So it's important to realize that just because something is zoned hotel doesn't necessarily mean that it's vacation rental. You have to talk to the individual association and see what
Right.
their guidelines are. But that also comes into, I think, what a lot of people, when they go and they purchase into a complex. I mean, that history in that Manitowoc, people invested additional dollars in places like Maui Vista and whatnot, where they are, hey, this is vacation rentable. I'm putting it in there because I plan on using a portion of the year and then using the other portion of the year to help pay for my costs and have my dream winter location, relatively covered while I'm gone. And
Mhm.
the same thing goes with other people. A lot of people, a good example would be the palms. You have Wailea palms and and the palms at Wailea. Sounds very similar. They look very similar. One's vacation rentable, one's not vacation rentable. People make their choices on where they want to live based upon the rules that guide those places. So, right now, even though it's resident, most of those places are sitting vacant and unused because people don't want to deal with the 14-day quarantine when they come over. So do keep that in mind when you're looking at a place. Generally, you can always go to our website, mauirealestate.net, and search vacation rentable. Sometimes other websites have problems. Realtors will go in and they'll forget to tick the vacation rentable box. So when it goes into the multiple listing service, it will fail to come up on a search result. One of the things that we do is we've individually indexed the different complexes so that if you're looking for vacation rental, if the agent messed up, hopefully, usually yours will still pop up as vacation rental depending on what complex you're in. So keeping that in mind, is there anything else you wanted to add to the Manitowoc or more specifically the loophole?
It's not really. We covered a lot and it is complex, but I do want to make a couple of comments. One, you might not be a fan of vacation rentals, but that doesn't mean that you should be opposed to Manitowoc or what anybody is doing when they advocate for Manitowoc. And the reason why I want to say that is, one, it provides a huge amount of money to this county. Our county needs money during this financial crisis, like every other county in America. And those properties, those Manitowoc properties, are paying a very high tax rate, and they actually have a fairly limited impact with transient accommodations. So transient accommodations, it's not the same as somebody living in the unit 365 days a year. A lot of these units aren't rented out with that much occupancy. It's just a little bit of money that they're taking in to supplement or pay for the unit itself. It's not like they're operating, at 99% occupancy and the owner doesn't even come and visit here. A lot of it's mostly left vacant. But regardless of that, the other thing I want to point out is we are talking about property rights. I am not a pro short-term rental, pro transient vacation rental person. I am a pro property rights person. With these Manitowoc properties, people made investments based on what the government promised them they could do with their property. The government doesn't have the right to just change the rules on people, whether it's residential zoning, whether it's apartment zoning, whether it's hotel zoning. If you entered into a contract to buy property, knowing that the government allowed you to do X, Y, and Z with your property, they can't just pull the rug out from under you and change the rules. I mean, they do it, it happens, and a lot of times the government gets away with it. But we really have a duty as citizens, even when a disenfranchisement of rights doesn't personally impact us. We have a duty to tell our representatives when they are acting against the interest of justice. And when they change the rules on people out of nowhere, that is against the interest of justice. And if they get away with it when it comes to apartment zoning, they'll get away with it in residential zoning, they'll get away with it in hotel zoning, they'll get away with it as often as they can. So we all need to hold the government accountable, even if they're doing something that we might, personally like. You might hate transient vacation rentals. If you are truly a moral person, you need to oppose illicit acts or unethical acts by the government, even when it supports something that you personally like. That's where our ethics really need to lie. So,
and that's one of the things I noticed in the different meetings when people came and communicated their concerns about the bait and switch associated with it. They were terrified because, whether, certain people with the other changes to putting the cap on transient vacation rental licenses and bed and breakfast licenses, and then really winding it down, and basically saying, hey, there's a limit, those have been modified and changed where, they're more flexible. But the big thing, these legal vacation rentals are one of the biggest allies against illegal vacation rentals. They're spending the time, money, and effort to adhere to the laws and rules that the county has put forth. Many of them take years to, match and change their property so that they could, fit these specific rules so that they can do the vacation rental. So for those couple of months to 6 months a year that they're not using it, they can supplement their costs, and more importantly for the county, dramatically increase the tax base in which they're pulling from. So the thing that I find about these changes, being able to do transient vacation rental licenses and bed and breakfast licenses, is that I always get surprised when, I see people quote some astronomical statistic, like there's 10,000 illegal vacation rentals that are on the island. And I'm like, how did they come up with this number? And the way that I can only think is they just went into VRBO and they said vacation rentals, and then all the ones that are on the Manitoy list, all the ones that have a TVR. Certainly there are ones in there that are illegal, but the percentage of that is inconsequential comparatively. And that's why I'm so surprised, people I see all the time, oh, I have an illegal vacation rental right next door to me, and da-da-da. I see different vacation rental cars in there. And they would certainly know if it was licensed, because they have to put a big old piece of plywood that says, applying for a TVR license. If they're doing illegal rentals, there are means in which you can contact the county. So try not to punish those that are trying to adhere to the rule and help the county tax basis and pay for additional roads while not even using as much infrastructure by comparison. Sorry to get on my soapbox, but one of the things that I wasn't really clear on, does the Manitoy, like when it comes to commercial property, are you allowed to do vacation rentals? I mean, I suppose that depends on your application and your development, right?
Yeah. When it comes to commercial properties, I don't think you can, I'm not sure I understand the question.
I've just, the hotel that's directly across from Costco. I think it's a Radisson or something like that. That particular property, when I looked at it, was like, don't quote me on this, but I thought it was commercially zoned. So when it came up to be a hotel, I'm assuming there's additional loopholes, but I wouldn't imagine you guys would know that.
Yeah, I mean, that probably has to come down with when it was being developed and the different agreements. Yeah, the permitting for that. So
that being said, one facet of vacation rentals that I don't quite understand, what are hostels? Like we have like one hostel on the island. It's like multiple beds. How does that come into play? Do you guys, Jen, are you aware of, I think there's one on the west side, right?
Yeah, that's interesting that you asked. I was just looking at a list of hotel operations that I got from Real Property Tax. And I know there's a few hostels on that hotel operations list. So they are getting taxed at the hotel rate in that particular case. But there can be exceptions to the rule. Like I was surprised to find that the Pioneer Inn, which I thought of as a hotel, I think that's run by Best Western, um, that is in a historical zone and taxed at short-term classification. So that's included in the short-term rate. So I think it depends on what kind of entitlements you made at the time or where that property's at in zoning, or there's just so many different things that
And the
that
history
can,
associated with that. I mean, that's
yeah.
historically been a hotel and one of the first buildings that was used for that on the island. It has a lot of significance, and I've stayed in there a few times. It's really, really tiny, but it's you feel like you're stepping back in time. You can sit out
Yeah.
on the balcony. I very much enjoy going there, even though it's very rustic by comparison to most vacation rentals. And I mean, I just want people to really understand that vacation rentals are not the enemy. It's, yes, there's an associated impact to the infrastructure and people in Maui, but we can see the impact of not having those around right now. We've dramatically decreased the amount of active vacation rentals associated with, the emergency rule declarations that are in place, and we'll get to that next. But given that those aren't happening right now, there's almost a third of the island that are unemployed. There's, hour-long waits, for, food supplements for these people who don't have a proper income right now in order to support themselves in a very expensive place. So, I mean, to me, and I've talked to Jason a little bit about this, I always feel that vacation rentals should be used as a tool in order to help and supply affordable properties. And what I would like to see, which is probably impossible given the sentiment associated with vacation rentals, I would like them to have developers apply for a special license where they say, hey, because there is a serious cost associated with putting entitlements on vacation rental, on residential properties. And people say, hey, I want to have they want to have an affordable home for their kids, their grandparents or whatnot. When they see some of this new construction, $600,000, and unfortunately is considered affordable, even though that's not really affordable for the average person. And in all reality, a lot of these newer developments that are coming out are 650, 750,000. I mean, to me, if they had this rule, let's just say you built a neighborhood that were all residential, non-vacation rentable, but the county says, look, we're going to allow you to vacation rent these homes for 2 years or 3 years. During that period of time, for every year that you're vacation renting, you need to drop the sales price by 100,000. To me, that would make sense because those vacation in dollars are going to go directly to help the people of Maui and the limited housing supply that we have here. We have almost 10,000, shortfall for residences that we need on this island. And unless something innovative and different happens, some change in the rule, there's no way for a developer to even build affordable housing given the cost of buildings. In the last 4 months alone, the cost of building supplies have doubled. The cost of the entitlement to build any resident, especially if it's going to be more affordable and higher density, goes up as that density increases, and there's bigger pushback associated with the people who live in the area. So there are hard costs associated with building affordable housing, and there's lots of hurdles to overcome. And when developers go in and they apply for these licenses to build something, they'll spend millions and sometimes millions upon millions of dollars to get entitlement to build an affordable just to get shot down. That means those costs are still tied into that property that get rolled over into the future use of it. So no matter what happens, those costs have been incurred and will impact future values of that property. So, and it's scared. I mean, there's developments that have just come to a halt because there's no way that they can be affordable anymore given the costs associated with it. So I would like to personally see some additional tools put in place to help subsidize the costs that make affordable the emphasis for developers to build affordable, not only because it's better for the community, but it's more profitable. You want to motivate them to build these properties and say, hey, I can make more money. probably not going to happen given the sentiment associated with vacation rentals. But to me, I think that's really the only tool that would even scratch the surface to make something truly affordable. If you want on a $350,000, $450,000 home, how else are you going to do it? You know, that would mean the developer is going to lose $300,000 on building a place that they're going to sell. And in many cases, they do that right now. So, going on again off my soapbox. So, vacation rental emergency rules. Right now, if you are looking to rent your place here on Maui, you have to adhere to the rules of the association. If they're not allowing vacation rentals, you know, given the whole COVID, you just might not be able to. Right now with emergency rules, if you rent your place and somebody does their 14-day quarantine, from my understanding, they're not allowed to rent it for 6 months after that point. Can you explain that a little bit more, Jen?
Right. So under the emergency rules that I think came to light in August, what they changed was you can rent your place for 6 months. That's considered a long-term rental to someone, an incoming resident, let's say, and they can quarantine in that home for the 2-week period instead of having to go to one of the approved quarantine hotels that is on the list on the county. So that they proposed that as an alternative, because what we were seeing is a lot of people that wanted to come, that were moving here. A lot of people are trying to get out of the mainland, and they, you know, wanted to do that kind of lease. But at that time, even somebody who had a permit, a short-term rental permit, this is not using their permit per se, but it's allowing them to rent their place in that 6-month period and have the family or individual quarantine there.
Mm-hmm.
So what the stipulation is, they're supposed to have a 6-month lease. So if this intended resident is coming in having a 6-month lease, they are able to do their quarantine there because of that 6-month lease. Does that make sense?
It does. How does that apply, though, to places that you can vacation rent? I mean, if somebody's coming in from the mainland, where are they supposed to stay right now?
Right. So
say they wanted to come for 2 months.
Yeah, the county has mandated that those, and the state, those type of visitors must quarantine in a hotel first, and then they can take the remainder of their stay in a vacation rental. They have to quarantine in a hotel first.
Are any of those hotels in existence right now for 14 days?
Yeah, there's actually a list on the planning department's website. I can share that link with you. And it'll indicate which, actually I could probably pull it up and share screen. But those, yeah, so what it does show is that there are quite a bit of hotels not available for that operation.
Very limited opportunity to come and stay at a vacation rentable spot that you can do your 14-day quarantine. So I wonder if that gives people the opportunity to hopscotch over to another rental. Let's just say somebody comes in, and I wouldn't want to say that they're trying to get around the rules, but really adhere to the rules and keep the community safe. So if somebody came here and they stayed in one of those hotels for 14 days, do they then have the opportunity to stay in a vacation rental for like another 2 weeks to a month, depending on what the location is?
That's correct. So once you've done your 2-week quarantine, then you are eligible to stay in a vacation rental. You're eligible to enjoy your visit on the island, move around.
You want to show us that?
Yeah.
Is that on the?
See that?
Ah, there we go. Okay. All right, I got it. Perfect. So yeah, you can see that, and then provide the link on our website along with this. So if you wanted to listen to this show, you can go into our podcast at MauiRealEstateRadio.com. There'll be a link there to this list if you're looking for a place where you can do your 14-day quarantine and then stay somewhere else on the island without impacting their stay. So off on that, are there other emergency rules associated with this? I know they are saying that coming soon, was it October? They're going to try to do testing. We were going to do testing previously, but given the surge in the United States, there was insufficient testing from my understanding. That's why they stopped it.
As far as I know, it's just that the state and county, they keep pushing back that date. And I think just recently they've decided that they're going to push back the October date again. And I don't know if it's because of the reason that you gave, or they just haven't solidified the protocol for testing. But I believe what the counties have asked the state is if we could use inter-island travel as the sample for this testing protocol and start using it on our, inter-island travelers. Just to see. And I think that's a good idea, at least just to get the ball rolling for the state and seeing how the implementation could work and, sort of work out some of the kinks of what they're thinking could work on our end. Yeah, we're trying to come up with a series of protocols kind of similar to what the county's been doing, looking at Kauai and their bubble sort of protocol, and try to come up with a way that could work for the community here, and then present that to our county. But that's just kind of in the works.
And of course, the most important thing is to keep the people safe here on island. We don't want the spread of COVID getting. We do have limited resources on the island that makes it very difficult for us to just simply open the doors to all the vacation rentals on the island. If we did that and people started coming here, there's the very real possibility that we would run out of equipment, PPE. As it is, we're already strained with the people that are on island here. We had some of the lowest in the nation, and then we ended up having a cluster of infections associated with Maui healthcare system. On the island. We've seemed to be getting that under control at this point, and as the state battles with contact tracing and our own woes associated, I think we were really resting on our laurels. We were sitting equivalent to what New Zealand was. The number of infections was, statistically zero, and then one way or another, we had a relatively rapid transmission and community spread between the islands and on the islands. And on an island by island basis, now that we're kind of shut down in terms of that 14-day quarantine on traveling, some islands are dealing with it better than others. Oahu seems to have the numbers, returning to more normalcy, and they got 2 more weeks, I believe, or 10 days associated with the lockdown that they have there, limited, and they'll be opening it back up. Maui seems very lucky. We're getting, 3 to 5 infections a day. And then from my understanding, the Big Island is starting to see those bigger numbers. It's kind of plateaued, and we're all bated breath, watching the numbers come out. So it really is dependent on island by island. Maui has been one of the luckiest considering our population size and density. We've been really on top of it and working together as a community as best we can. There's definitely, as our mayor says, knuckleheads out there that are, breaking the rules and having big parties and whatnot. But most of it seems to be isolated to that very quick, cluster of infections associated with the Maui healthcare system. So people do get mad. I mean, this is their lifeblood. This is we have had restaurants shutting down. We have, people having difficulty paying their mortgages, long lines for food. Fortunately, we have lots of food and through the Maui Food Bank. And I do really encourage people to go to the Maui Food Bank in order to provide to the people of Maui. Money goes a lot farther than dropping off the food, because every dollar that you give is worth tenfold to them, because they get things at large volume discounts and through nonprofit 501c3 tools. And we seem to be doing quite well. We certainly have a long road ahead, and it's a big question of when the vaccine is going to be available. I hear anything from, December time, we're good, Garens, don't worry. And then all the way to mid-May, mid-summer time, 2021. And then some are even saying to the very end of 2021 before we're going to have, more of a normal environment here. Regardless, given that we've battled it as well as any state could have hoped, and we have been leading the nation most of the time in our fortunes, we should be some of the fastest to bounce back once we open up, because we're going to open up as safe as we possibly can. And hopefully other people outside, both the US as well as other parts of the continental United States will see us as a safe place to go with the protocols that we have in place. And that's really what the county's looking to do, is to ensure, the health and safety of the people, as well as opening up the county. I don't like it. I hate it. I wish that we didn't have the 14-day quarantine. I think that this whole thing just is a major headache and an absolute train wreck of a situation, but we have to deal with it. You've got to do something. And as much as I hate a lot of the decisions that have been made, they're working, as well as it can. Our death counts are low, and we're just gotta have to, bear this together the best way we can. So I appreciate, the hard decisions that are having to be made. Have you seen any, additional measures that have either been a big positive or negative? I mean, to you both, with the short-term portion of property here on island, what would you like to see change, and what have you liked to not?
Jen, do you want to take this first, or you want me to go?
Go ahead.
All right. What would I like to see change, or what do I appreciate? I mean, I am gonna come right out and say this. I am a bit of a pessimist. I've been a bit of a pessimist this entire time. I got a lot of guff back in February for warning people about the coronavirus, and I was laughed at in a board meeting for saying that this is something that we should be taking seriously. And March, April, I got a lot of guff for telling people that this was going to last longer than 3 months. So I'm a pessimist, but my pessimism has sort of brought me to the right ends, or at least fairly accurate predictions. The truth is, after hearing what's going on with hotel and lodging and the plans that they are coming up with multiple layers of testing, tracking people, insulating staff from their families outside of the resort areas, I think that if we allow the opportunity for these industries to function again, they will be able to show us that they can function in a very responsible manner and in a manner that protects us. However, we do have to acknowledge that some folks are going to be knuckleheads, whether they're the guests or whether they're the people who are working at the hotels or anything, whether it's short-term rental home operators or B&B operators. You're going to have knuckleheads in all of these different categories. So mistakes will be made. We need to acknowledge that there has to be a certain allowance of mistakes to be made, and we need to plan for those mistakes so that we can mitigate any damage that occurs. If you want the 14-day quarantine to end, if you think this is all ridiculous and you're over it, wear a mask. Get everybody you know to wear a mask. Take vitamin D. There are studies that show that masks work. There are studies that show that your severity of COVID-19 might be linked to your levels of vitamin D. That's why we're seeing such bad instances of COVID infections in minorities, because minorities historically, this is scientific fact. People with darker skin oftentimes are working jobs where they're not getting enough vitamin D, and they have a hard time getting that vitamin D in their systems from the sun. So, we need to do our part as a community. Wear your masks, exercise, be healthy, give distance. But at a certain point, we have to take proactive steps. Hopefully we'll see more plans, kind of like that Temptation Island plan. People hated it, but it was a well thought out plan. And whoever is listening, whether you agree with anything we're saying or not, please just try and have an open mind. Try and have an open mind for the plans that are coming up, because really, I know it seems like, big business is evil or whatever, but these folks employ thousands of Maui residents with families that rely on them. And the federal money is running out. All of that unemployment assistance is going to be gone if it's not gone already. And if there's one thing that the past 4 years have taught us, if not the past, century here in Hawaii, it's that you can't trust the federal government to protect you. Out here, we are on our own. And perhaps that is part of our success, that we as a community were able to come together and act responsibly. And we didn't require the federal government to mandate things. And heck, we didn't even really require much enforcement from our state and county governments, because we are being responsible. And I beg you, please continue to be responsible. And for all you knuckleheads out there that think this is some liberal hoax or something like that, get over yourselves. Get over yourselves. Recognize that this is a global problem. It's a serious problem. Liberal people own businesses too, and they're suffering too. A lot of small businesses are going under. A lot of people are out of work. This isn't some hoax to hurt anybody's political career. This is a real thing that we're concerned about. And whatever comes next, I hope that we maintain our concern for people's lives above, a strong economy. I know it hurts, and I'm one to talk. I'm one of the lucky ones that still gets to keep my job. But people are always going to be more important than money. And Clint, if people listen to anything you say or anything I say, I want it to be donate to the food bank. Donate to whatever organization that you believe in, but the food bank is I donate to the food bank. I'm on the board of the food bank. They do such an amazing job. I mean, it would take me forever to get into any level of detail that would do them justice, but I am so impressed with Rich and the team over at the Maui Food Bank. And if you guys ever go over there, there are opportunities to volunteer, talk to them, learn about what they do. It's not, that definitely is a worthwhile endeavor. So yes, donate and be a good neighbor.
We actually sponsored the Kihei Drive. It was quite expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars, put aside in order to feed 1,000 families. I mean, but at the end of it, it was a giant box of food. I mean, we're talking hamburger meat, vegetables, potatoes, canned goods, Spam, bread. I mean, this was a big box of food that definitely could feed a family for a week. And as these come up, I mean, people wouldn't wait in line for hours unless they needed it. And it's needed. And they have a very good and efficient system, between central pickup locations, which I'll provide a link to that if you guys want to go. It's typically on Thursdays. And if you want to volunteer, you can talk to the individual locations about putting time in. But the main thing and what's needed most is, of course, money. And the people who can stretch the dollar the farthest are going to be the Maui Food Bank because of their connections that they have. So please donate to the Maui Food Bank.
And one more thing, take advantage of rental assistance programs. I know it's extra paperwork. I know it might be a pain in the butt, but the rental assistance programs are going to save us in the long term from a major crisis. A major economic crisis can be averted if landlords work with your tenants, take advantage of rental assistance programs. Tenants, don't be afraid. Work with your landlords. Work out payment plans. We want that money to keep on flowing, not to line people's pockets, but rental payments have a multiplying effect. It goes to utilities, it goes to mortgages, it goes to upkeep, it goes to property taxes. It funds the county and your community. Keep on paying rent if you can. If you can't, immediately, please go seek out help from a rental assistance program. The state has started one up. MEO is in charge of one. I think Catholic Charities is operating one. There's a bunch of them. go to the county website. They have all the information for you.
Shoot that link to me and I'll share it on the blog as well.
Yeah, I'll send that to you, and I'll let Jen give an opportunity to talk.
Anything, Jen, or is that about good?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I know a lot of people in the short-term tax classification have been screaming about, tax relief and really feeling hit there. But I think if we can come up with a solid plan for reopening, that's really going to come to relief for that.
Yeah.
And, opening
A
up
plan that keeps everybody
safely.
safe, that
Yeah.
we can open up, make sure that people aren't positive and spreading the disease in the community. And we have the
Yeah.
protocols in place to help prevent the spread, like mask adherence, in public locations where there's gatherings.
Testing.
So
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you both so much for coming and joining us today. I'm Clint Hansen with the Maui Luxury Real Estate team and Maui Luxury Real Estate LLC, the Hansen Ohana. You can always find us at mauirealestate.net or go and listen to any of the shows that we've done at mauirealestateradio.com. Thank you, Jason Economou, who is the Government Affairs Director for Real Estate Association of Maui, and Jen Russo of the Maui Vacation Rental Association. She's the Executive Director there. Really appreciate it. And if anybody ever has a question, feel free to email me at clinthansen33@gmail.com. That's CLINTHANSEN33@gmail.com. Or you can always text me 808-280-2764. I'm always hungry for radio topics. So look forward to seeing you guys again, and I appreciate all the help you do. Aloha.